Okay, so as you can tell, the cucumber looked good from the outside. I did the squish, making sure it doesn't bend, flexibility check on it and everything. But even after all that, cutting it open, it has that brown, so we can't use the cucumber, and I don't have any more to choose from because I expected that to be fresh, which, as you can tell, even fresh fruits and vegetables can end up not being fresh. So onto the carrots, you want to take off that top layer with the peeler to avoid any dirts, pesticides, or anything else getting into the dish. Because nowhere in the cooking world that I know of, nowhere is there dirt in the recipe. If you want recipes involving dirt, you need to go find a gardening channel. Now, because of my big hands, these smaller carrots are harder to peel. And of course, there's about 900 different ways to peel vegetables and fruits. Some people say there's only one or two right ways to do it, but like I said, cooking's not perfect. So you can buy a bag of carrots, find the ones that find the ones that look like ones you want to cook with, and then you can go through and pick out whatever you want to use, however many carrots you want to use. If you don't like carrots, then you can leave them out just like every other vegetable in here, like how I have to leave the cucumber out. Make sure you get all of it. And you don't have to go with this many carrots either. So whatever you decide to go with. I'm thinking maybe one or two more of these will do. This one, you just want to get it peeled to where you get rid of that first layer at least. Sometimes you have to peel a little more off because it tends to have, I guess what you could say is flaws in the middle of it. You want to cut the ends of them, as I've already done to these ones, because the ends can have some flaws that'll ruin the flavoring and the dish altogether. And because you don't really want to eat the stem of a carrot, or whatever the top's called. As you can see, if you can't peel the whole thing in one go, you can always just peel half of it, flip it over, peel the other half. So for this one, 4 carrots will give enough flavoring. Now what I do is I cut them up the long way first, especially the bigger carrots, so you don't end up with too thick of a slice in there when cooking. And then I even cut them this way. So, like I said, doesn't have to be perfect. No perfection whatsoever. And yes, I am a disabled vet going through getting everything taken care of, including neck and shoulders. So any of you that have neck, shoulder problems, or any problems like that, another nice thing about this dish is you can take your time cutting up the fruits and vegetables, or the vegetables. So if you need to take a few minutes break to give your arms and stuff a rest, it is completely acceptable to do. When I first started making this dish, it was taking me up to 1 to 2 hours just to do the prep, as this is probably taking me today, but we've had a few hiccups with the recording. Not the cameraman's fault. I blame Skynet. For those of you that don't know what Skynet is, go watch Terminator. The entire series, to get a true idea what Skynet is. For those of you that do know what Skynet is, and are sitting next to someone that doesn't, force them to watch Terminator. And if they still don't get what Skynet is after watching Terminator, they might be hopeless. If falling in the hopeless stage, feel free to quarantine them for at least 2 weeks to make sure that the hopelessness is completely removed from their system. And you could, if they aren't watching this video with you, you could make sure that they don't know that it's not a CDC order. So, I'm going to finish cutting up these carrots. And don't worry about you don't really have to worry about the thickness of the carrots or celery or anything, because how long this is going to have to cook with the chuck roasts in it, these will get cooked down. But I like to make sure that they're cut small enough. Once you get the carrots cut, just sprinkle them over the dish, because once again, you're going for flavoring. And the carrots add a nice flavor to this. The cucumbers would have been a nice flavor too, but due to the cucumbers being bad, you couldn't put them in here. So you would do the carrots before the cucumbers, actually, because you want to sprinkle the carrots here, and then you would layer the cucumber in slices over the dish, followed by the potato, which is next. And yes, for those of you that watch TikTok, I'm a potato. Before you ask, no, I don't watch TikTok too. How many people aren't going to believe that? Okay, so once the carrot's done, like I said, don't have to use them, but I like the flavoring that it adds to it. So in a way, what you're doing is making a beef stew, kinda, but just distributing the flavoring a little different. Now, the potato. So one baking potato will work for this recipe. So you don't really need like a whole bag of them if that's what you're thinking. If they're smaller than this one, you might want to get 2 just to be safe, but this one will be more than enough for this, especially with the way I slice these. So you want to peel the potato as well. You don't have to peel the potato actually, because when you cook it, it will cook in there. Me, I do this because I don't want to if I was making mashed potatoes, I'd leave the skin on there, but with this dish I don't want to have the skin on it, so I can, I don't know, it's just, it's not so I can do anything, it's just a way I've been used to doing potatoes. What's great about these peelers is if there's a blemish in there that you're trying to get out, you can just take the side of it and cut through and carve it out without having to stop, put this down, grab a knife. So in a way it saves time. Okay, I guess the skin just didn't really feel like leaving that spot. Like I said, I'm not a professional chef, so my techniques are not what you would expect from somebody doing one of these videos or cooking. Oh, bruise spot on the potato. What am I gonna do? Cut it out. But I'm gonna finish peeling it before I get rid of the. Another reason I peel it is because sometimes the skin will hide the any rotting or blemish in the potato. So like when I looked at this the other day, or when I bought this, I didn't know that this bruising was here. You don't want that in the recipe. So that is why I peel the potato, or skin the potato. Why we call it peeling when we actually skin it. Random thought for the day. It's a potato skin, and yet they say we peel it. Now for this one, because of how much bruising is in that tip, I'm just going to use a knife real quick and cut that bruising away. Okay, so once you get the potato down like this, you want to do somewhat thin slices, not too thin, not too thick, but once again, cut it to your liking. These will cook down in the pan as you cook the chuck roast. So how thick you make them is up to you. It will still get cooked down because this dish cooks for about 2 to 2.5 hours, or until the chuck roast is cooked to the rarity that you like it. Whether it be rare, medium rare, well done, extra rare, still mooing while it's eating the salad as you cook it. Whatever your preference is. So once the potato is sliced up and you can see there's no more bruising or anything, you just take the slices, layer them across the dish. Doesn't have to be perfect, just you want to cover the dish. Once again, you want to spread this out for flavoring and somewhat aesthetics, I guess. So there's the potato. Now this same dish, same pan works for turkey as well. You can do the same thing and put a turkey, cook a turkey over it, and there you have a really nice big Thanksgiving meal. Now with the parsley, don't want this. That's not gonna taste very well. So I bought two bundles of parsley just to be safe. You don't need 2 bundles, I don't think. Once again, this is seasoning to flavor, to taste. So if you don't like parsley, you don't have to use it. If you like parsley but don't like a lot of it, then you don't have to use a lot of it. It's just all in the preference. And while you cut it, what's real nice about this is while you cut it, you get that fresh green smell that reminds you of a nice summer breeze and sitting out either on a lake or a meadow with the nice fresh air around you. And I'm going to stop motivating myself to stop doing this and go fishing. There's a calm about this too. A weird calm, because cutting stuff up is just calming to some people. Humans are weird. We are weird as a species. You don't have to cut it like this. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is the way I do it. And you cut it down till you start noticing too many stems, because you don't really want the stems, you want the leaves. So now that I'm starting to see the stems, we're pretty much to the end of that batch of parsley. So once you're done, take the parsley, spread it over the dish. Once again, doing this for flavoring. Oh, that's lettuce. Looked like a piece of plastic. So because of how much this one thing of parsley is covering, we don't need to worry about cutting up the other batch of it. This will put more than enough flavoring in this dish. So you want to make sure you get as much of the parsley as possible, because you want to get it spread throughout the dish so you get the flavoring all the way around. And then the garlic. Garlic, you can season the flavor with the garlic as well. So we're going to peel this open. You can either peel it open, or if you can see where the cloves are, you can take a knife and gently push it in between them to get the peel off. Fresh garlic, I have discovered, is better than even the minced or whatever you buy in the little jars that are already done. If you have trouble peeling it apart, you can always take a knife and gently pull it out if it decides it wants to come out. I don't usually have this much trouble with this. Oh yes, and when doing this, do not hold the knife at all times. Put the knife down. So, part of this is whatever you're in the mood to do, however many cloves you're in the mood to put in for the seasoning. But the fresh garlic, you don't need as many cloves, so we'll go with 4. The nice thing about the fresh vegetables, whatever you don't use, you can wrap up and store away. So I'm going to cut this one to get the peel off of the outer side of this. So with the cloves, since I'm not really a chef and haven't been to school to learn all this, I take this outer peel off, and then I cut where the base of it was, because it's part of the root system and you don't want that really in there, as far as I know. Anything I'm saying that is either wrong or misconstrued, feel free to correct me, please. This way I can learn and maybe help other people learn as well. And just remember, everybody starts somewhere in the learning process, and we've all been to this point where we didn't know what we were doing, so keep that in mind when you go to give constructive criticism or constructive help. The other nice thing about cooking with fresh vegetables, you get to smell the nice aroma that they give off when you cut them and expose them to the air for the first time. And the garlic gives off a very, very pleasing aroma. So we're just going to take that first peel off, kind of like how some people take that first layer or two of the onion off to get to that good part. Okay. Yes, this takes time, but that's the part about cooking. Okay, so now we have the garlic, and you don't have to worry about garlic sizes, because when you cook it, it will cook it down very, very, very well. See, cooking chuck roast to the way I like it, and the way the people here seem to like it, takes about 2 hours to cook it. 2 hours cooking with the beef broth and everything. The garlic will cook down, so you can cut it to whatever size you prefer, as long as you don't, you want to try to avoid overpowering any certain part of the dish. So you want to avoid too much garlic in one spot, because when you take a bite of that spot, you will end up with a really, really bad taste in your mouth. Not to mention the dragon's breath that would go with it. So once you get it cut down to the size you want, you can take it and start sprinkling it around. Yes, I know I haven't cut all the cloves, I'm just getting this part spread out. Now if you leave them in the bigger chunks, you might not need 4 cloves, because the flavoring will definitely get into the dish. So we could even take 2 of the cloves off of this and just do the next clove. Since it's fresh garlic, it'll get the flavoring into the dish just as well. If you want a really strong garlic flavor in there from this, then you could use more. This is one of the use whatever it takes to get to the flavoring you prefer. So we're narrowing down on the end of the dish, getting the dish prepared and ready to cook. Now, because of how hot the house gets when the oven's heating up or I would prefer to wait until this dish is pretty much ready before preheating the oven. Now, depending on your oven and how fast it cooks, if you want to get it done within a certain amount of time, you can cook this at a higher temperature than what I do to cook it faster. You just don't cook it for that long, so you don't overcook it. Because if you cook it at a high heat for a short period of time, you could dry out the meat. Same with cooking it at low for a long period of time. If you don't pay attention, you could overcook it that way as well, but you're more likely to overcook it at the high heat short time. So what I do is preheat the oven to 350, and then I flip the chuck roast every half hour. And after flipping it, after I flip it 2 or 3 times, I will check it to see the rarity of it. If there's any blood, put it back in, cook it for at least 20 more minutes after that. So basically I cook it for about 2 hours, 1.5 to 2 hours before checking it. And that also depends on the size of the chuck roast. The size of the chuck roast that we're doing here, I'll probably cook it for about 2 to 2.5 hours before checking it. Okay, so got the garlic in there for the season, for some of the flavoring. Another reason I'm not going to use that much garlic is because I also put garlic powder in. Okay, so as far as vegetables, for this dish, that covers the vegetables. Now, what I do, you can do this any way you want. I'll season the dish, so I'm going to put the garlic powder in here. I season the dish as well as I season the meat. And of course, some of these containers, you have to pop the shaker cap off to get the paper cap off. Disassembled before use. So, I'm going to put garlic powder, I'm going to shake some thyme on here, and this, once again, seasoned to taste. And I've found that these seasonings I use, to me, taste the best. And I think the rest of the people in the house would agree with me, but once again, personal preference and personal flavoring profiles. Can't tell you how different the flavoring profiles are for everybody. Okay, so that was the thyme. Now we're going to put on some rosemary. So I season the vegetables in the pan, and then I also season the chuck roast before I put it on the pan, which is another reason why I don't. Well, I don't know where that came from. I season both, and this makes sure that there is enough seasoning in the dish for all the components to catch some of the flavoring. So we're going to shake some rosemary on here. And another reason for flavoring both of them is with how thick this dish is. You don't want to just sit here and dump all the seasoning in the dish to try to season all the vegetables. If you season it lightly, season the one lightly and then season the other, you can ensure that there's enough seasoning and it's not over seasoned. So we put the rosemary and thyme in there. Now we're going to put bay leaves in. Once again, bay leaves for flavoring. You don't want to actually eat them, but you do want to make sure that you get the flavor in there. So I just grab a bunch of the leaves and just toss them in there until it looks like there's enough to make sure that it gets seasoned well. So that should be enough for the bay leaves. And but the bay leaves, you only put them in the pan. You don't put them on the chuck roast. And then freshly grind the pepper. Season the flavor. And make sure that I go over the whole thing at a slow pace to make sure it all gets the seasoning that it needs. If it doesn't seem to be grinding the seasoning, you can always spin it back the opposite direction. You don't have to use the freshly ground, you can use the already ground pepper, but the flavoring is so much different. It goes along the whole, this being freshly made. And then the Himalayan salt. This, I just put enough in my hand to take my hand over and let it sprinkle through my fingers. Not putting too much on. Not putting too little either. Alright, so now that we got the vegetables done, these are the chuck roasts that we're doing for this. And then we also have the beef broth and the chicken broth. Now, you only really need 1 to 1.5 of these, because as you cook this, the vegetables are going to release juices too and mix with this. But I would say one to 1.5 of the beef broth. If you don't have enough beef broth or enough broth from one, you could use the chicken broth. The chicken and beef broth do go together, and you want to kind of pull the vegetables aside on one part to see how far up the broth came. And since it didn't come up that far, we're going to add the other broth. Now the reason I have to use the chicken broth is because I didn't realize we were that low on beef. I thought we had at least 1 full bottle. And you just kind of want to spread it around and get a good layer of it. And the reason you want to dump it in here first is so you don't wash the seasoning off the chuck roast. Now we're going to season one side of the chuck roasts with our seasonings. Season the flavor, as always. As is the rule in any cooking, season the flavor for it to taste. So whatever your taste is for certain seasonings, go for it. So once you season one side of the beef, put the seasoned side down when you put it in the pan so you can season the other side. Instead of season it, flip it, season it, and then lose seasoning before you even get it in the pan. Then just season the other side of the steak, chuck roast, beef, turkey, whatever it is you're cooking on this. Might have to try this with lamb eventually. So rosemary, thyme. The thyme you might have to shake it because it doesn't, depending on the brand you get, determines it's kind of shaker you get with it. Rosemary, thyme, Everybody here loves garlic powder, so we're going to load the rest of this garlic powder on here. Rosemary, thyme, garlic powder. We'll go ahead and do the salt next. You just take the salt and take it in your hand and lightly sprinkle it over if you can. Don't worry about putting too much in one spot on this, because when you flip it, it's not going to cook in this side right away. And once you flip it, the broth will absorb some of it and spread it throughout the dish. And finally, the ground pepper. When you get to where you're seasoning the beef, you could start preheating the oven depending on how long it takes your oven to preheat. And that is what the dish looks like before cooking. Minus the cucumbers, obviously. I gotta wash some of the salt off my hands so I don't spread it all over the house. Salt tends to stick. Okay, and there's the oven. So we're going to cover the seasonings real quick. And we're going to go place this in the oven and flip it every half hour, and we'll be back when it's done. Alright, so first session round is done. So we're going to turn off the timer, and it's time to check the status of our chuck roast and flip it. So as you can see, the beef is already browning and everything, which is a good sign. So now, you want to use whatever utensils you need to flip it. So, I'll use a fork and tongs, but I'm not going to pierce the meat with the fork because I don't want to release any of the juices that are being cooked into it. So, I'm going to use it to help lift and flip, not pierce and flip. This way, the meat can stay unpunctured. Try to avoid touching the sides of the oven as it is hot. You could pull it all the way out to do this, or however you do it. Because as I said 16 times in the other videos, cooking is not a perfect science. So, you want to flip the meat, and you can see how the broth is now visible because the vegetables are starting to cook down. And once they cook down more, it will fill up more with liquids. So now that it's flipped, slide her right back in there, set her up for another half hour, and we'll do the next video when it's done to show you the finished product. Alright, so after rotating this a few times, we are going to flip this one more time to get a look at the bottom side of this and to keep the top side from drying out. So the reason for rotating it every half hour is so you don't overcook one side of the chuck roast. And once again, without piercing, flip them over. So this is what the chuck roast looks like right now. Now, a lot of people say, well, cook it to a certain temperature and do the whole temperature test with the thermometer and punch it in there to see what it is. Because, oh, it has to be this temperature. You're going to do the traditional cut test. Because this is how I was taught. So, find the thickest part of the chuck roast and the thickest chuck roast, which would be this one. You don't have to cut all the way through so you don't ruin too much of the meat in case you have to put it back in. So we're going to cut this thick chunk right here. And depending on what it looks like on the inside, that right there is pretty good looking to me. I don't know if you can see it very well because of the lighting, but it's done. Now, since that's cut and it's done, this is the end product. There is your chuck roast. Bon appetit.